Hey guys, so I'm back with another educational video. Today we're talking about what I'm calling the missing links in astrology. And what I mean by this is that there are some pretty major blind spots that we can have when reading an astrology chart. And this can happen to absolutely anyone. This can happen to an astrologer. This can happen to you when you're doing your deep dives into your chart using ChatGPT or just the regular Google machine. These are things that we often overlook because a lot of the times we don't realize how important they can be. So whether we're intermediate, advanced, or beginners at our practice, it's always important and it's always good practice to go back and review the blind spots. Just like you look at your blind spots when you're driving, that's what this is like. So the first missing link is actually one that's pretty understandable. Like, I get why people miss this. I get why I used to miss this, but it's really very important and it can be a very central feature of your natal chart or of your interpretation. And this first missing link is going to be the minor aspects. So I totally understand why people might think that minor aspects are not that important. They're called minor for a reason, right? But as it turns out, a minor aspect could turn out to be very important in your specific chart for several reasons. But the main reason that I'm going to be focusing on today is because a minor aspect, when it is perfected, when it is at 0 degrees, and if you don't know a lot about aspects, you might want to watch some of my other videos first, but essentially aspects are conversations between planets. When these planets are having these conversations, they are affecting each other. And when you have a planet having a conversation at 0 degrees, a perfect aspect, even if it's a minor aspect, this conversation can be pretty profound. And this is even more emphasized if, let's just say, you don't have a whole lot of aspects to begin with, and then you have a very potent 0 degree minor aspect. This is even more important than a major aspect that is several degrees out. And I'm not the only person who thinks this. This is not just coming straight out of my brain. I already felt this way, and then reading my favorite astrology book, Astrology Symbols by Robert Hand. Robert Hand is my favorite astrologer. I think he's a national treasure. And if you haven't picked up this book and you love astrology, I highly recommend it. If you're a bit of a nerd and you don't have this book, you should have this book, especially if you are first starting out. And even if you're not, this is a fantastic reference book. So Robert Hand says in this book that a minor aspect is greatly felt when it is at 0 degrees, much more so than a major aspect when it is several degrees out. And as I said, I totally understand why you might think that a minor aspect is not that important, because even major highly respected astrology websites such as astro.com, they even define a minor aspect as something that is of secondary importance to the major aspects. But this calling it a minor aspect is a bit of a misnomer, because it makes people believe that they are minorly important when that is not necessarily the case. So if you have any minor aspects in your chart, make sure you drop them in the comments. Tell me if you felt them to be of supreme importance in your life. And if you'd like an entire video on the minor aspects, make sure you drop a line in the comments and let me know, because the more people I see talking about a specific thing in my comments, that makes it more likely that I'll make an entire video about it. And I also kind of want to make it a habit to talk to you guys through videos. So you leave me a comment and I might take your comment and make a video about it. That's actually the next video that I'm recording today. So the next blind spot that I find people often overlook is the elemental void. And the elemental void is exactly what that sounds like. It is when you have a void, so like a missing element. When you have an entire element missing from your chart, this can pop up as several different things that we're going to talk about in a second. But I also want to make a huge disclaimer about this, because even if, let's just say, you have no fire in your chart, maybe you have no fire in your chart, but you have a very potent Jupiter that is in a square or in an opposition to your personal planet. So that Jupiter is going to give you some oomph. So you might not be super fiery, but you're not devoid of passion and exuberance, for example. So there are ways that we just naturally mitigate these things a lot of times, but nonetheless, it's important to look at these voids because they can give us clues as to where our lives can need a little extra support. So for example, if you have a fire void, it could be a little bit difficult to get things going. You could get sort of stuck in a rut because that fire element is really what pushes us to change, to do things, to take action. And so when you don't have that, it can be a little difficult to do all of those things. If you have a missing earth element, so if you have an earth void, you might struggle with like the day-to-day mundane boring things that just regular humans have to do, like maybe just going to a regular 9 to 5 job. To a person with no earth in their chart, this could be a little bit difficult because they're gonna be like, man, like that's boring, like I'm not passionate about that, or like I don't get to be creative there, or my heart isn't really in it. Versus like somebody who has a lot of earth in their chart, they would be like, those things don't matter, right? But when you're missing the earth element, all of those basic grounding things can be a little bit difficult for you to get into. So if you have no air in your chart, air represents communication, ideas, the intermingling between people. So if you have no air in your chart, one of the major things is that you could be a bit of a loner because you just don't feel the need to connect with other people. Or you might have a really great idea and you're just gonna start and do whatever it is that that idea is. You don't necessarily feel like you have to share with somebody. So if you have no air in your chart, let's just say one day you wake up and you're like, I really want to get into martial arts. You're just going to go sign up for school for a martial arts class, for example. But if you were a heavily air dominant person, you would talk to your friends about it. You would say, hey, what do you think about this? Do you have any experience with that? You always have to connect with others when you are air dominant. So when you're missing air, then you might be missing that element within yourself. Another thing that can happen when you're an air void is that you could lack objectivity sometimes. And I don't mean that in a negative way. You could just be very passionate. This could be experienced as a person who's very passionate, but when you try to give them objecting opinions, they might just be entirely closed off because they are so single-minded in their observations, for example, or in their opinions, and that's because they lack air. And lastly, if you have a water void, water represents emotions, intuition, the realm of the unseen that connects us as human beings. They are the tethers of the heart, essentially, the water elements. And so, water elements, like it's multiple elements. So if you're missing the water element within your chart, sometimes it could be difficult for you to access your emotions. And it's not that you don't feel, you still have a moon, you're still a person, you're still going to feel. It's just that it will be a little more difficult for you to articulate your feelings properly, and because of that, it'll be more difficult for you to express these feelings to others. So if you have any of these elements missing within your chart and you'd like a video on maybe some remediation, how we can go about doing the most with what we do have in our chart, make sure you drop that in the comments. So let me know, like, Denise, I have a fire void in my chart. What do I do about it? I have an entire little series on the elements that you might want to watch, but I am willing to make an entirely new video all about remediation and how we can get the most out of what we do have in our chart so that we can stop focusing on the things that we're missing. And the last thing that I find that is a huge, major missing link in astrological interpretation is when people don't take a thorough picture of the chart ruler. So the chart ruler is whatever planet rules your rising sign. And I always describe to my clients that your chart ruler is your avatar. So if your natal chart is like a game board, your game piece is your chart ruler. So whatever planet that is. So if you're a Virgo rising, that Mercury is your game piece. And if you want to get the most out of that game board, out of your life, out of your personality, out of yourself, you better take a thorough look at that chart ruler. So you have to look at the house placement. You have to look at the dignity. You have to look at how strong that planet is. Is it being helped by benefics? Is it in the top of the chart? Is it in the bottom of the chart? Do you have a night chart? Do you have a day chart? All of these different components are going to give you a more nuanced view of that chart ruler. And I find that people often overlook this because I'm the first person to say that when we take a big global look at the chart, we can get a lot out of it. And that is very true. I am a Sagittarius after all. I like to see the big picture, and I think we can get a lot from the big picture when we're doing chart analysis. But then after you take that global holistic view, you do want to like put on your little binoculars and take a more Virgo granular look at things. And that's when you look at things like the chart ruler and all of the little details that affect that chart ruler. And when you do that, you get a more thorough picture and are able to give the person a better idea of what it is they have to work with and what things might be a bit more of a struggle. Because if we know the things we're going to struggle with, then it's easier for us to find ways of remediating them. It's like when you're in school and you're like excellent at math, but you're dyslexic and you might need a little bit more help in the English language arts department, then you just get some tutoring in English and then you're going to be all right, right? So that's essentially what I use astrology for. So I look for my deficiencies so that I can make up for them in other ways, because like you can't like cut off your deficiencies, you can't eliminate them, but you can make it so that they don't hold you back, essentially. So that's the way I use astrology. That's the way that I recommend my clients to use astrology. And if you don't know my face, my name's Denise and I'm an astrologer. I post content here and on puroastrology.com to help people use astrology as the self-reflection tool that it really is, because it turns out if you're into self-improvement, astrology could be very useful for this. I also make a lot of relationship videos because, as it turns out, relationships are kind of like the place where we have the greatest potential to do our greatest self-improvement. So who would have thunk it? So even though astrology is a science, like we do use mathematics and astronomy to derive the chart calculations, when we're talking about chart interpretation, that, my friends, that is an art. It takes artistry to be able to put a story together in a way that makes sense and that is useful for the person that is getting their chart read, right? And so with that in mind, guys, I strive to be a very good artist, and I try to instill in you, my little astro babies, this sense that we want to be holistic in our chart interpretation, in our chart analysis, and that we not only we know all of the facts, but we got to be able to blend them together in a way that makes sense and looks pretty and just like people want to interact with, right? That's what I think my goal is as an astrologer, and that's what I like to teach. So guys, if you like this educational video, make sure you give me a thumbs up. If you like educational astrology videos, drop a nerd emoji in the comments, and like, if I see more nerd emojis, I'll get the sense that people want more of this educational stuff, because I feel like a bit of my fire coming back and I feel more passionately drawn to teaching astrology lately. And I know that I said that I was gonna sell a course, and for the longest time, like I put it all together and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna sell this. But then I was like, I'm not a salesman, I'm an astrologer. I'm an astrologer and I like to teach. So I am more thinking that I'm just gonna put it online and put it here on YouTube for anyone who wants to consume it. So guys, if you like that idea, drop a nerd emoji in the comments and I'll see you in the next video.